Hello, my name is Mohammed Kimji. In the previous video, in my analysis of book number 9 of the Iliad, we saw that the Achaean embassy that went to Achilles' shelter to persuade Achilles to come back into the battle failed in its mission. Odysseus tactically manipulated Agamemnon's offer of aparasia apoina, unlimited ransom, presenting this to Achilles as axiodora, worthy gifts, or translated as worthy recompense. But Achilles refused the offer of gifts. Phoenix followed Odysseus, took a different tactical turn, but he also manipulated Agamemnon's offer of aparasia apoina and presented the offer to Achilles as Dora. But Achilles refused. Aias did not follow Odysseus and Phoenix. He manipulated Agamemnon's offer of unlimited ransom, and he presented this as poine, recompense, repayment for a wrong done. But Achilles refused. I want to just briefly speak about why Achilles refused the first two offers, Agamemnon's offer of gifts as misrepresented by Odysseus and Phoenix. Why would he do that if he stands to gain honor, time, by taking the wealth of things that Agamemnon would be giving to him? Well, the first reason maybe is that Achilles suspects that Agamemnon's words have been manipulated. Now, he does say, we know in book number 9, that I hate that man who speaks one thing from his lips and who hides one, and who, in hiding the thing that he really wants to say in his heart. Now, it's not clear again, as I mentioned, whether or not he is referring to Agamemnon, whom he suspects as hiding what he really wants to say, or whether he suspects that Odysseus is saying one thing but hiding something else in his heart, or whether or not Achilles is saying something about himself, that he is not going to hide in his heart something and say forth something else. So it's possible that he suspects that there is a lot of manipulation going on and that Agamemnon didn't really offer gifts, but we don't know. It's also possible that on the assumption that Achilles really does believe Odysseus, who claims again at line number 261 that Agamemnon offers axiodora, which has been translated by Lattimore as worthy recompense, and also Phoenix, who communicates at lines 515 and 602 that Agamemnon offers gifts. It's possible that Achilles, if he was to accept Agamemnon's offer as gifts, or accept that Agamemnon is offering gifts, he might actually take offense to the fact that Agamemnon is offering gifts, because to offer gifts implies that the things that are being given belong to the giver of those things. And in this case, it would imply that Agamemnon actually does possess Briseis as his. And when he offers this to Achilles, it might actually make Achilles even more angry, because Briseis does not belong to Agamemnon from his point of view. Briseis belongs to him. So maybe the idea of gifts is another affront to Achilles' honor, and it could be taken as another attempt by Agamemnon to dishonor him. It's also possible that the emissaries want Achilles to believe that accepting Agamemnon's offer would increase Achilles' honor. But from Achilles' point of view, to accept Agamemnon's offer suggests that he is dependent upon Agamemnon. Whereas we have seen that from Achilles' point of view, it's not he who is dependent on Agamemnon, it's Agamemnon who is dependent on him. That's why he presents Agamemnon as being like a chick. In fact, all of the Achaean members of the army as being like chicks that feed off the mother that brings them food. And in this case, of course, the mother is Achilles. So we've seen that Achilles resents being the provider, the one who, in sacking cities, depicts himself as foraging for food like a mother bird who has to feed her chicks. He resents being the provider, but he also resents being the one provided for, as though he is the chick and Agamemnon is the mother bird. It's actually really quite striking that Achilles represents his fellow fighters, soldiers, as chicks that are completely dependent, wingless birds, chicks that can't even fly, kings that are so immature. It's such an insult. And among those chicks, he includes, again, those people whom he calls his dearest friends. It's also possible that Agamemnon is offering so much. And we went through the inventory of all the things that Agamemnon is offering. It's really many, 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 many times what he actually took from Achilles. It's possible that in offering so much, the sheer exorbitance of the gifts offered may be seen by Achilles as humiliating. The wealth that Agamemnon has put on display in front of his army as available for him to give is just staggering. And it might be seen by Achilles as an attempt by Agamemnon to show how small Achilles' own wealth is in comparison, and how small Achilles is in comparison by implication, and therefore how much more Agamemnon is worth than Achilles. That is, how much greater Agamemnon is than Achilles. And if Achilles sees it that way, then he would see the offer of gifts as yet another attempt by Agamemnon to dishonor him. Lastly, Achilles could be rejecting Agamemnon's gifts because he wants Agamemnon to realize that everything that Agamemnon has offered, as valuable as Agamemnon might think it is to him, is in fact simply not enough. Giving gifts is not the same for Achilles as paying for what Agamemnon has done. Agamemnon must pay not with gifts, but rather with the lives of the Achaeans. And in this sense, Achilles' rejection of Agamemnon's gifts would thus be an attempt by Achilles to dishonor Agamemnon by subordinating the value of Agamemnon's gifts to the value of Achilles' warcraft. So those are some ways of thinking about why the presentation by Odysseus and Aias has failed. We know that Odysseus and Phoenix has failed. We know that Aias, when he misrepresents Agamemnon's offer of apoina as poine, as repayment for a wrong done, as a penalty payment, as a reparation, we know that Achilles is actually most partial to what Aias has said. He said that you've spoken what's in my own mind. And yet, Achilles has rejected. He simply wants Agamemnon to suffer through the death of his men, whom he is supposed to protect. Book number 10. The context of book number 10 is during that very same night in which the embassy has failed to persuade Achilles. And it opens in the following way. Now, beside their ships, the other great men of the Achaeans slept night long with the soft bondage of slumber upon them. But the sons of Atreus, Agamemnon, shepherd of the people, was held by no sweet sleep as he pondered deeply within him. You see here how sleep is represented as a god. The Achaeans are seized by sleep. They are in bondage to sleep. It's really interesting how this language, which represents a master and a slave, or a ruler and a ruled, is here depicting sleep and those who are under sleep's power. Agamemnon, we know, is the shepherd of the people because he is the leader of the expedition to Troy. He is the commander. Now, Agamemnon here is described as much the same way as the Achaeans are described at the opening of Book 9. Um, his uh, his state of mind is described as like a storm that Zeus brings down, a rainstorm or a storm of hail or a blizzard. And you get that nature analogy that depicts the turbulence of Agamemnon's own spirit, his own heart. And we are given a description of Agamemnon actually taking his hair and tearing it by the roots in worry. Well, Agamemnon decides to seek out the counsel of Nestor. And it turns out that Agamemnon is not the only one who had a sleepless night. Menelaus himself is trembling at the state of affairs in which the Achaeans find himself. And he tells Menelaus that he is going to speak to Nestor. And he tells Menelaus to search out for Idomeneus and Aias, and to waken the kings to give them orders. It's also very interesting that early in book number 10, Agamemnon represents his own life as born to suffer. He says to his brother Menelaus, "Let it be you and I ourselves who do the work, seeing that Zeus cast on us, as we were born, this burden of evil." So very much like Achilles is represented as someone whose birth necessitated a bad destiny, a child of fate that was born to suffer. Agamemnon is representing his life as fated to suffer. And these are the two of the most powerful, most honored men in the Achaean army, both of whom are fighting for the recognition of being the Aristos Achaion, the best of the Achaeans. So I ask again that when you have a figure in the text that is represented as being of high value in the order of rank, when you have that man represent his own life as destined for evil or destined for suffering, what is that communicating about human beings, all of whom strive for honor, but in a situation where those who have honor represent their own lives as evil? This is not, again, a moral evil. This is a term that would describe misfortune. Well, Agamemnon does speak with Nestor, and Nestor counsels Agamemnon to waken Diomedes and Odysseus and Aias. And we know that these are three of the most honored men, the men with the highest time in the Achaean army. They are the elite of the elite. Nestor also, like he did in book number 9, where he said that this is a night that will either destroy our army or preserve it, so he tells Agamemnon here at line number 118 that the need that has come is no more endurable. Okay, it's a very dire situation. Nestor awakens Odysseus, and the two of them go to Diomedes, and they find him with his gear outside of his shelter. And Nestor wakens Diomedes. Now, I'm going to, at this point, jump to the point where maybe at line number 198. Maybe about 203. So at this point, Nestor is speaking to the kings that have all been assembled. Oh, my friends, this is at 203 or 204. Oh, my friends, is there no man who, trusting in the daring of his own heart, would go among the high-hearted Trojans, so he might catch some enemy who straggled behind them, or he might overhear something that the Trojans are saying, what they deliberate among themselves, and whether they purpose to stay where they are, close to the ships, or else to withdraw back into their city. Nestor wants to send a spy to find out more about the Trojans' plans. And Diomedes tells Nestor that he's willing to go, and he actually would like somebody else to go with him. And there are a number of Achaeans who are willing to go with Diomedes, and Diomedes chooses, when Agamemnon tells Diomedes that he should choose a man to accompany him, Diomedes chooses Odysseus. Odysseus and Diomedes are going to go on a night mission to find out more about the Trojans' plans and about their situation. And Odysseus tells Diomedes at 251, let us go, for the night draws far along, and the dawn nears. The stars have gone far on their course, and the full of the night has passed by, through two portions, and the third portion is that which is left us. 2/3 of the night has passed. Time is running out. Diomedes takes the armor of Thrasymedes, who gives Diomedes a sword, a shield, a helmet, which we are told is made of bull's hide. It doesn't have a horn or any horns or crest, likely to keep Diomedes inconspicuous in this secret mission. And Odysseus takes from Meriones, Nestor's son, a bow and a quiver, which is unusual. You don't usually see Odysseus as being represented as an archer, but here he has a bow, he has an arrow, he has a sword, and he also puts on a helmet made of leather. And on this helmet, we are told, at line number 263 onwards, on this outer side of the helmet are white teeth of a tusk shining boar that are sewn in. Often in the Iliad, we find a hero represented in terms of an animal that is fierce and at times like a white a wild boar. Well, Odysseus prays to Athena to make this mission successful and to welcome him back, he and Diomedes back to the Achaean ships. And Diomedes also prays to Athena, the goddess of spoils, to watch over him. He offers Athena gifts. It's very interesting when I think to the biblical writings. I don't recall a single time where the God of the Bible is offered any gifts in exchange for anything. And here it's actually quite common in ancient Greek literature to try to please the gods by offering them gifts in the form of sacrifices or spoils of war or other things. And Diomedes does this to Athena. It turns out that the Achaeans are not the only one who called a council meeting. The Trojans also called a council meeting. And just as the Achaeans wanted to learn more about what was happening in the Trojan camp, so Hector wants to know more about what is happening in the Achaean camp. And he offers prizes for the one who will act as a spy to find out what is going on with the Achaeans. And he says at line number 305, I will give a chariot and 2 strong-necked horses, who are the finest of all, beside the fast ships of the Achaeans, to him who has the daring, winning honor for himself also, to go close to the swift-running ships and find out for us whether the swift ships are guarded as they were before this, or whether now the Achaeans who are beaten under our hands are planning flight among themselves, and no longer are willing to guard them by night, now that stark weariness has broken them. And who is the one who decides to take up Hector's offer? His name is Dolon. And in fact, book number 10 is sometimes referred to as the Doloneia, the part of the Iliad, the part of the poem about Dolon. Dolon accepts Hector's offer, and in fact, he wants the horses and the chariot that belong to Achilles. And when he tells this to Hector, and he tells Hector to promise him that these will be his once he returns successfully to camp, Hector agrees. Well, when Dolon leaves to spy on the Achaeans, Odysseus sees him, and he and Diomedes capture Dolon by ambush. And when Dolon sees them, he starts running, but he is caught. And the way in which he is caught is quite typical, represented in quite typical language in the Iliad. At line number 360, as when 2 ripped-fanged hounds have sighted a wild beast, a young deer or a hare, and go after it, eagerly always, through the spaces of the woods, and the chase runs, crying before them, so the son of Tydeus and Odysseus, sacker of cities, kept always hard on his heels and cut him off from the people. But when he was on the point of reaching the Achaean pickets, as he fled towards the vessels, then Athena put extra power into Diomedes. And Diomedes throws a spear at Dolon, intending to miss him because they really want to capture Solon, to mine him for Dolon, to mine him for information. And so Diomedes intentionally throws a spear over Dolon's right shoulder, and Dolon stops, and his teeth are chattering, clattering in fear. And he offers Diomedes, once he is caught, he offers Diomedes and Odysseus a ransom. This is something that we have seen Adrestos do earlier to Menelaus. And the language is very similar in the Lattimore translation. He says to Diomedes and Odysseus, at line number 377, "Take me alive, and I will pay my ransom. In my house there is bronze and gold and difficultly wrought iron, and my father would make you glad with abundant ransom. Were he to hear that I am alive by the ships of the Achaeans." Odysseus makes it sound, when he speaks to Dolon, he makes it sound like he doesn't have much to fear. And the implication is that they will let him go once they extract the information they need from him. Dolon's legs are shaking, and he tells Odysseus and Diomedes the information that they have sought to learn from him. When they ask him about Hector, and they ask him about the guards and so on, they ask him a whole bunch of questions, and Dolon responds in truth. Dolon also tells them that the Thracian king, whose name is Rhesus, has the finest horses I ever saw. This is at line number 436. His are the finest horses I ever saw, and the biggest. They are whiter than snow, and their speed of foot is the wind's speed. His chariot is fairly ornate with gold and with silver, and the armor is golden and gigantic, a wonder to look on. It is not like armor for mortal men to carry, but for the immortal gods. This is something that is very appealing to Diomedes and Odysseus, because part of, again, the value of the hero consists in what he has, and they will want to capture these horses. Well, Diomedes tells Dolon that he's not going to let him live. If he frees Dolon, then Dolon would come back as an affliction to the Achaeans. It's better just to finish him off. And as Dolon is about to supplicate Diomedes, trying to reach Diomedes' chin, Diomedes strikes him in the neck. So this is how this scene is depicted. At line number 454, Dolon spoke, and the man was trying to reach Diomedes' chin with his strong hand and cling and supplicate him. But he struck the middle of his neck with a sweep of the sword and slashed clean through both tendons. And Dolon's head, still speaking, dropped in the dust. They took off his cap of marten's hide from his head and stripped off also the wolf's pelt and the back-strung bow and the long spear. Brilliant Odysseus held up these to Athena the spoiler, high in his hand, and spoke a word and prayed to Athena. Hail, goddess, these are yours. To you, first of all the immortals on Olympus, we will give you due share. Now, you can see how Athena is described here. She is the god of spoils. After Diomedes cuts off Dolon's head, they strip Dolon of his armor and they offer these spoils to Athena. And it raises the question, what does this moment and moments like this tell you about the gods of the Achaeans? What does it tell you about the values by which the people who worship these gods live their lives? What kind of a God is this to whom the Achaeans offer the bloody spoils of enemies who are shown no mercy? And what does it tell you about the Achaeans who worship these gods? I had mentioned previously that the gods of the people are reflections of how the people understand themselves, how they see themselves. And I don't know if it's the right word, but the values that we find in the divine world are projections of human beings who live by those values. And so we're getting, when we see the way in which the gods are described, we're getting a picture of the ideals of the human beings who worship those gods, as divine, as the most perfect beings. Well, Diomedes and Odysseus come upon the Thracians and the king of Thrace, who has these beautiful horses that Solon referred to. And the king is sleeping in the center for, I guess, it's the safest place to be. And Odysseus points this out to Diomedes, that this is the king. And Diomedes slaughters 12 Thracian soldiers, one after the other. And he's described in this way. So at line number 482 onwards, gray-eyed Athena breathed strength into Diomedes, and he began to kill them one after another. Grim sounds rose from there as they were stricken with the sword, and the ground reddened with blood, as a lion advancing on the helpless herds unshepherded of sheep or goats pounces upon them with wicked intention. So the son of Tydeus attacked the Thracian people until he had killed 12. Now let's stop there for a second. Notice how the hero is once again represented in the figure of a beast, a predatory beast, in this case a lion, which is a very common simile. As a lion comes across unprotected goats and cows, lambs, whatever. And you can imagine, for those of you who are interested in nature, you will likely have seen on television, most probably, but some of you maybe even in person, a lion feeding, attacking, bringing down prey. And you know how violent this is, and you know how the survival of the lion depends on feeding on prey. And so there's no wickedness or immorality in what the lion does. When Agamemnon, um, when the poet speaks about the lion um, pouncing upon the sheep or goats with wicked intention, this wicked intention has no connection whatsoever with what you and I would call morality. Wicked intention from the standpoint of the sheep or the goats who are going to be killed. But wicked intention is actually a description of that glorifies, that exalts the strength of the hero. Though there's no moral connotations associated with this. Because, as I've mentioned a number of times, there is no morality in nature, and there is no morality in a people who understand themselves, their own lives, in the likeness of nature. And so Diomedes, after killing the 12 Thracians, kills the king of Thrace. And Odysseus and Diomedes take the horses. Now, if you look at how the poet describes what happens after or as Diomedes is killing the Thracians, Odysseus is simply catching them and moving them out of the way to create a clear path for the horses Odysseus and Diomedes anticipate taking. As a lion advancing on the helpless herds and unshepherded of sheep or goats, and pounces upon them with wicked intention, so the son of Tydeus attacked the Thracian people until he had killed 12. Meanwhile, resourceful Odysseus, as Tydeus' son stood over each man with the sword and struck him, would catch each dead man by the foot from behind and drag him away. With this thought in his mind, that the bright-maned horses might pass easily through and not be shaken within them, as stepping on dead men. These horses were not yet used to them. But when the son of Tydeus came to the king, and this was the 13th man, he stripped the sweetness of life from him as he lay heavily breathing. He's caught in a dream at that time. Diomedes wants to actually continue the massacre, but Athena reminds him that he needs to get back to camp, advises him that he needs to get back to camp. And Diomedes and Odysseus leave. The slaughter of the Thracians, we are told, angers Apollo. At line number 516 onwards, angered with Athena, Apollo plunged into the great multitude of the Trojans and roused a man of counsel among the Thracians, Hippocoon. And he, starting out of his sleep, when he saw the place left empty where the fast horses had been standing and his men in the shambles of the slaughter, gasping their lives out, he groaned, and he called aloud my name to his beloved companion. And a clamor rose from the Trojans. And you can see again how the gods themselves are at odds with one another. And when you think about the gods being divided amongst themselves, how is that going to reflect on their subjects, on the lives of their subjects? If the gods are in perpetual conflict, how can human beings avoid conflict if, in fact, the gods seek their honor through worship among human beings, among other things? But you see here how the gods who are immortal, they will never die, precisely because they are struggling for the very same things that human beings struggle for, where in order for one to win, the other must lose that which everyone seeks. You can see how the fact that the gods are immortal means that conflict will be immortal. It simply cannot end. Odysseus and Diomedes had taken the armor I'd mentioned of Dolon, and before they went to the Thracians, they had hidden it in some shrub. And now Odysseus and Diomedes, having killed the Thracians, they come to that very same place where they had hidden the armor, and they take it. They report at camp what has happened, and this was a small victory for the Achaeans. But it's not going to save them from further carnage that the Trojans will wreak on the Achaeans in book number 11. That's where I will turn to next. My name is Mohammed Kimji. If you would like to connect with me, please do so on LinkedIn. Thank you very much.